my name is Jonathan Curtis. Throughout the latter half of 2022 and the early part of 2023, I conducted a research project funded by Arts Council England exploring the snare drum as a solo instrument. Specifically, I conducted research into the various compositional techniques and composed some of my own original snare drum marches. I was specifically interested in the march style. Since I've done that, I have composed, performed and released a collection of 10 original snare drum marches, and I'm going to discuss in this video the compositional techniques I used, the use of rhythm, the use of vocabulary, structure, time signatures, subdivision, rudimental vocabulary, and how this all came together to form a coherent collection of pieces. I always began in the same way. I began by setting the metric foundation and thinking about the structure of the piece. And from there, I could include various pieces of rudimental and even more contemporary vocabulary to pad that out, to decorate it. We can broadly think of the march style as comprising simple metric foundations with advanced, dense, or a little bit more adventurous phrasing to decorate that. So what does all of this mean? Well, the metric foundation comprises a number of key elements. The time signature, which talks about how we group the beats together in a bar. The subdivision, which comprises how we divide those beats up. The use of rhythm, the use of accents to create the overall meter of the piece. This briefly, simply, defines how the overall piece feels and sounds in a rhythmic sense. So where time signature, subdivision, and all of these things are individual concepts, meter is the combination of all these things as they culminate in the overall rhythmic feel of the piece. So every time I began a piece, I began by thinking about the meter. What's the rhythmic foundation on which I want to base this piece? So to see this in action, we're going to begin with one of the pieces from my collection called Port Cruin. This is a simple piece in 6/8 that uses very simple accent phrasing and more adventurous vocabulary to decorate that. And this is a theme we'll see throughout this video and throughout the collection on the whole. We tried to set a simple, recognizable rhythmic pulse with a strong, recognizable accent phrase, which we can then decorate and vary and expand upon in a number of ways. So let's see this in action. When I wrote Port Cruin, I started with a very simple 6/8 meter. This comprises two primary beats to the bar, which is often two groups of 3/8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. But I wanted something a little bit more energetic, a little bit more aggressive and driving, so I decided to go with two groups of 6/16 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the underlying meter sounds like this. And this defined everything that was to come. And we can hear there straight away, even though we're working in groups of 6, because there is a strong 2-beat principal pulse, it will line up very nicely with the act of marching itself. With that established, I began by setting out an accent phrase that was strong, simple, and recognizable that I could repeat, develop, and reprise later on in the piece. So if I remove all of the decoration, like the rolls and the drags and the things like that, this is the simple phrase that formed the basis for Port Cruin. And as I say, this would form the basis for everything that followed. This was like the foundation on which we could build the rest of the piece. So the first 4 measures of Port Cruin had decoration applied to them, rolls, drags, the occasional flam, that decorated that basic accent pattern, and this gave us the main rhythmic idea, the main motif that would run throughout the piece. We can hear there we've got the makings of a piece, we've got the makings of a piece of music. Now, one of the things I was keen to include when working on these pieces was a strong sense of structure. I wanted the arrangement and the structure to be coherent and not just to be based on me throwing ideas at the page and seeing what happened. So I often use simple principles like call and response or motivic development, where you take a simple phrase, you repeat it, you combine it, and you arrange it with similar phrases that are all built on the same idea. So to see this, we can explore a 4-bar passage later on in the piece. This has got a slightly more advanced accent phrase. We've developed the original idea and slightly more dense phrasing. So let's have a listen to that now. This runs from bar 35 in Port Cruin. can hear there the sense of energy is still there, that original pulse is still present, but it's been expanded on. It's been expanded upon and developed upon. Now, when we break this passage down, we find there are two core phrases, which I've called A and B for the sake of analysis. A is a simple one-beat phrase that sounds like this. If we repeat that, we can hear it's very familiar, very recognizable. Very simple, very strong, simple theme. Now, in contrast to that, and based on the same principle, is what we've called B, which sounds like this. Now, both A and B have the same ending, but a different beginning. So if we put those together as an A and B phrase, we get something that is at once familiar and varied. It starts with an idea, and then it varies it. It presents a call and gives an appropriate response. So here is A and B together. And again, you can hear the makings of a musical passage here. Now, when we progress to the second bar, I'm following here a sense of call and response, but a same call, but a different response. So I've called this B dash. This is a phrase that is based on the original B, but with a slight variation. So here's the original B, and here's B dash. We can hear it's very similar, just based on an extra phrase and an extra accent in there. So A, B, B dash. This gives call, response, same call, different response. Okay, and we're halfway through our phrase. Now, bar 3 of this passage is actually really simple. It's an A. And now we come to the resolution of the passage, which I've called B dash, A dash. So B dash, we go back to the second bar and we take the variation of B and we begin this last bar with it. And A dash, which we could think of as C, is the same phrase that began it all, but with a variation. So here's the original A, and here's A dash. We put those together and we get A dash. As I say, I could have labelled that last one C to differentiate it more clearly, but actually, in my own mind, from a compositional standpoint, it was actually very firmly based on A. So reading across this 4-bar passage, we get A, B dash, call, response, same call, different response, A, B dash, C. I'm going to call it C just to help differentiate it. So A, B dash, A, B dash, C. And this is a phrase that I used throughout the whole piece. Not always exactly, but it was something that I was able to, again, develop and reprise just like I did with the individual bars. So here it comes across all 4 bars. Now, the whole point here is, as I've said, to develop coherence. I wanted this to be a coherent piece from start to finish without just throwing phrases at it. Now, to finish off this short section, if I play the opening 4 bars and then I play the 4 bars from later on in the piece that we've just explored, you will hopefully hear how there is a coherent development that is once varied and interesting, but still recognizably based on the same principles. So here's the first 4 bars, immediately followed by that latter section. Now we can start to explore the nuances of this approach a little further by exploring the next piece entitled Hotspur. Now this is simpler in one sense because it's based in 2/4, but for this one I wanted to explore the different relationships between subdivisions within this simple meter. So what I began with was dividing the 2/4 pulse into 2 halves, 1 and 2 and. I wanted to divide up each beat into 2 eighth notes, and then I wanted to play with the subdivisions within each eighth note. So looking at the first beat of the bar here, the first eighth note of each beat I played as 16th note triplets, triple and, triple and, triple and. And the second half of the beat I played as a 32nd note quintuplet, which is a group of 5. So we have triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But crucially, that's all happening in the space of 1 quarter note. Triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's easier to play than to count, so I'll give you a demonstration. And we're counting that in 2/4, 1 and 1 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 1, 2. Now when we play that approaching the tempo of the piece, we find the quintuplet gives a nice roll without being too dense. Because it's not the typical groups of 6 that we're used to, it's not as dense as we might originally expect. So what I was able to do was play with this theme of density by comprising that or combining that with a 32nd note group of 6 instead. So this is adding more notes into the space of that 8th note. So when we put those next to each other, we're playing with this sense of density. First beat will have the group of 5 on the second 8th note. The second group will have the group of 6. It's subtle, but it allowed me to play with this theme of density and subdivision. Now we can explore the use of structure again, because this one uses a much more simple structure than even Port Cruin from a moment ago. The opening 4 bars of the piece sound like this. And we can hear that use of the 6 at the end that increases the density at the point of resolution. Now, as one final example for this process, we can explore another piece entitled Main Battery, which might just be one of my favourite pieces in this collection. This, on the face of it, has a much more exploratory time signature. This is written in 1816, which originally sounds like something Frank Zappa might write, but actually this is based on a very simple process. It's 2 groups of 9. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Again, it continues this theme of wanting to explore simple time signatures, but being more exploratory with my use of subdivision. So I'm thinking of this in 2 groups of 9 16th notes, and I'm subdividing those 9s again into 3 groups of 3. So like I did with Port Cruin, I began with a very simple subdivision in a time signature that is actually not as complicated as it seems. So 2 main beats to the bar, each comprising 9 16th notes. From there, I could start thinking about where I wanted the accents, and then I could use some simple vocabulary to decorate those accents. So here's what I came up with for the first 4 bars of this piece. With the fundamental concepts of rhythm, meter, and structure established, we can turn our attention now to the use of vocabulary and the actual language we use to express the main musical ideas for these pieces. One of the early questions I wanted to tackle was what's really, fundamentally, the difference between rudimental pieces and marches, because in many respects they're based on the same principles. They share similar language, they share similar structure, they share similar function as well. Much of the early rudimental pieces would have been used as marches or in a similar military context. So one of the ways I decided to interpret the difference was to think in terms of the role the rudiments play. In many rudimental pieces, the main musical idea is developed by combining different rudiments. What I mean is, if we take a simple rudimental pattern like a paradiddle into a flamacue, the accents are defined by where they sit within those rudiments. A paradiddle has an accent at the beginning, a flamacue has an accent on the second stroke. So when we combine these two rudiments and play them consecutively, we get an accent on the first beat and then an accent on the E of the second beat. In simple terms, the rudiments defined the placement of the accents. For me, for these marches, I decided to differentiate from that by saying that the accents come first and the rudiments are used to decorate those accents. So it kind of changes the place of primacy. In rudimental pieces, under my interpretation, under my analysis, the rudiments are primary. In this approach, I decided to make the accents primary and use the rudiments to decorate. So I've got an example here from a piece that occurs within this collection called La Volta. And this is based on a waltz. So this was one of those instances where I was a little bit more adventurous with my use of meter, a little bit more adventurous with the march theme. I wanted to make something that was still recognizably a march, still had this strong recognizable accent pattern, but was in an unusual time signature for the context, which in this case is 3/4. Now I'm using this piece because this is one of the most rudimental pieces in the collection. I did use strong, typical combinations of rudiments to decorate these accent patterns. So here are the first 3 bars of La Volta, and we will hear the use of typical rudiments throughout this. Let's hear that again. And we can hear there some very simple rudiments that are applied a lot throughout the piece. Now we can explore the culmination of many of these concepts in one of the collection's most advanced pieces called Requisite Precision. This is in the time signature of 5/4, which is certainly not typical of the march context. It uses a lot of rudimental vocabulary, and because of its unusual time signature, it disguises a lot of the main themes, so it subverts a lot of expectation. Where many of the other pieces are based on expressing a strong, recognizable accent pulse, this one took a few more liberties and disguised some of the main ideas. So I'm going to play the first 4 bars of this piece. Remember, we're in 5/4 and it sounds like this. We can hear the use of some familiar vocabulary in there. We've got rolls, we've got roughs, we've got flams. But what's not obvious is the hidden use of a dotted 8th note figure. A dotted 8th note figure is an accent that occurs every 3 16th notes. Not as triplets, but in 16th notes. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. And this is something that helped develop the theme of this piece, but one I then disguised by the use of the time signature, because every time this dotted 8th note figure occurs, it runs from the second beat of the second bar of a phrase. So we don't hear it in the first bar, we do hear it in the second bar. We don't hear it in the third bar, but we do hear it in the fourth bar. And in each time in the second and fourth bars, this dotted 8th note figure begins on the second beat. So here is bar 2 on its own. We begin with 1 E and a, which sets up the introduction, and then from the E of beat 2, we hear this dotted 8th note figure. And we hear something very similar in bar 4 as well. The first beat sets up the bar, and then from the E of beat 2, we have the same dotted 8th note figure. It's disguised, it's subverted, but it's there. So this is a really nice example of how we can be a little bit more adventurous. Even though we start from humble beginnings, we set a simple time signature, we set the subdivision, we want a simple recognizable accent pattern, we can actually subvert all of these things to create something a little bit more interesting. Now, to continue and to finish up with this idea of meter, subversion of expectations, and how we can disguise the ideas in use, we can look at the 10 pieces of the collection as a whole. Across the 10 pieces, we have 4/4, 2/4, 3/4, 10/16, which we'll come to in a moment, 18/16 from main battery, 6/8, 5/4, 12/8, 6/8, and 4/4. Now, of those, 4/4, 2/4, 6/8, 12/8, 6/8, and 4/4 are all very common in the march concept. 3/4 is uncommon, this waltz idea we've explored already, and 5/4 is certainly very uncommon. But I want to finish with a look at this one called laconic incision, which is based in 10/16. Now, 10/16 is again something we might expect from composers like Zappa, but this is actually much simpler than it originally sounds. And this is something I explored in one of my first compositional collections with a piece called Numinous Measure, which was in 15/16. And just like with that piece, this is based in groups of 5. Now, if we divide these numbers by 5, we get the principal number of beats in the bar. In the case of Numinous Measure, what is 15 divided by 5? It's 3. There are 3 groups of 5 per measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5. Likewise here, what is 10 divided by 5? It's 2. So we've got a very simple march structure of 2 beats to the bar, 1, 2, 1, 2, but the subdivision subverts that expectation. And here we're using 2 groups of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this created some really interesting opportunities to play with rhythm and to play with structure, to play with subdivision and vocabulary that was in a simple within a simple context, but defied expectation a little bit. So the opening 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the opening 6 bars of laconic incision in 10/16 sound like this. And the goal is to try to hear this on a larger scale. Don't focus on the individual notes, focus on the larger 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it goes on in that way. Now you can hear there's some quite aggressive phrasing. There's quite a lot of density in the notes we're actually playing there. But hopefully you will agree there is still the sense of a simple, recognizable accent pattern: da 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 da. And I think this is something you would still be able to march to, because we're looking at the macroscopic level of the beat rather than the microscopic level of the individual notes we're playing. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover today. We've looked at the use of meter, of subdivision, of subverting expectations, of the use of structure, motivic development, call and response and reprise and things like that. We've looked at rudimental vocabulary. We've looked at the use of accents and how rudimental vocabulary can define the accents, or rudimental vocabulary can decorate the accents. And we've looked at, as I say, subverting expectation through the use of time signature and subdivision as well. So I hope this has given you some ideas into your own playing, or at least an insight into the use of rhythm and how it can be used in a compositional setting. So thank you very much for watching. I hope those of you that choose to explore it really enjoy this collection of snare drum marches, and I wish you all the best in your own playing. So thank you very much.